Next on the agenda is Mayor Kirk Caldwell's representative, Art Chalicone.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. I'm Art Chalicone, Acting Director, Department of Planning Permitting, and the Kahaluu representative for Mayor Kirk Caldwell.
Okay, questions for Art Chalicone this side of the room? Ken?
Do you have anything new for us on OSPCA?
I do. I do have a report. Okay. As I promise every month, I give an update on the Kahaluu SPCA project, and we do have some forward momentum this time to report. We received the draft environmental assessment for the Oahu SPCA on October 4th, and I'll give you a brief description of the draft EA process as it applies to how the Department of Planning and Permitting handles the process. This is a Chapter 25 draft environmental assessment, which means that it's joined with a special management area permit. Now, the Chapter 25 document, the draft EA document, has to be prepared in accordance with the provisions of Chapter 343. So even though it's a environmental assessment under a different ordinance, the ordinance specifies under state law, Chapter 343, that it be handled in accordance with those provisions. So I want to make that very clear that those provisions have to be met, and there are certain standards and timeframes that have to be met in order to comply with Chapter 343. And I'll just briefly go over those for you. The Department of Planning and Permitting received the draft environmental assessment document for development of the animal sanctuary in Kahaluu on October 4th, 2016. The department will first review the application for completeness, and that's completeness according to the provisions of Chapter 343. And will ask the applicant to make any needed revisions to the draft environmental assessments. Once our department is satisfied that the draft environmental assessment is complete according to the provisions of Chapter 343. And completeness doesn't mean that they've answered every question. The completeness means that they've met the minimum standards provided in 343 for that document. Okay, it will be made available for public review by sending copies of the document to the local library, Satellite City Hall, and the neighborhood board. Public documents may be sent to the applicant with a copy to, or public comments may be sent to the applicant with a copy to DPP. The DPP will also route the draft assessment to the relevant city, state, and federal agencies for their review and comment. We will also send a copy of the draft environmental assessment to the State Office of Environmental Quality Control, and this is what's commonly termed the OEQC, and the OEQC will publish a notice of the draft in its publication, the environmental notice. And the environmental notice is online at the OEQC website. The OEQC publication will initiate, once it's published, will initiate a 30-day public comment period. After receiving all of the public and agency comments, the applicant will address and respond to all the comments in writing, and the comment letters and the applicant responses will be included in the final document. The DPP will review the final document to ensure that all the comments have been adequately addressed. If the DPP is satisfied that the comments have been addressed and finds that the project will not have a significant impact on the environment, it will issue a finding of no significant impact, or FONSI, and send the final draft EA to OEQC for publication in the environmental notice. This process usually takes about 6 months to complete. Once the FONSI is issued, then the applicant may apply for its special management area permit. Now, if we find that there are significant impacts not addressed adequately in the draft environmental assessment, we will ask for the applicant to prepare an environmental impact statement. So those are essentially the procedures that we will be going through in the next several months with the applicant and the draft environmental assessment. And certainly we will make sure that the board receives and the community receives the opportunity to make that comments on the draft document. Also, in terms of fines, the fines are still accruing. Essentially, at this point, the fines are still accruing daily. As of today, the fines are at $12,500 for non-compliance with the special management area permit requirements. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, any other questions?
Has the Wahiawa facility approached you yet for any permitting?
No, not to my knowledge. Now, maybe they and hopefully have talked to my staff, and I haven't heard about it, but I have asked my staff that anything regarding the SPCA, please inform me so I can come back and inform the board what's going on. So, no, I do not, have not heard of any permits for the SPCA in Wahiawa.
There's a new source of fines for you.
Going to,
I turn at the mall.
okay, can you pass the, okay, Art, sorry.
Yeah, I want to know what happened. This same group got kicked out of Kalama Valley. If you guys have any background on why they were kicked out of Kalama Valley.
I can definitely explain to you why they were kicked out of Kalama Valley, is because that shopping center is zoned B1 neighborhood commercial district, and kennels are not allowed in the B1 zoning district. Therefore, they would not be allowed as a permitted use. They also did not receive building permits for their tenant improvements. So there were basically two violations. One, a zoning violation, and number two, a building code violation.
Okay,
My
Ken.
concern, can I have one more question? My concern is this has been going on for about a year. I mean, it's been brought up to the board. They came to the meeting. They were supposed to be here tonight, and they're putting it off. What are we supposed to do out here in Kahaluu? I think the majority of the people in the board is concerned. I'm very concerned on things like this, that sometimes money talks and power saves everything. And the common people really, we can voice, but we're so limited in what we can do. And that's my biggest concern. I know we're trying to prevent this from happening, and I'm all for it. Thank you.
All right, Ken. Back on. What are you doing?
Thanks, Art. Back in about October of last year, there was a grading violation in the wetland down here with OSPCA. And then towards maybe September or December, you folks backed away from that violation based on their having a conservation plan. And it's really clear that their conservation plan is only a conservation plan that NRCS has signed off on. The district has not signed off on it. So I'd like to urge you to relook at that violation, because without the district having signed off on it, they're still in violation. They do not have a waiver. So those fines are really critical, and they should be retroactive. They knew full well that they didn't have the authority through NRCS. They have to go through the district. So.
Thank you, John. I have been pressing my staff to look into this, and I will continue to press them on this, because I've been discussing this with Rick Towell at the Windward Soil Conservation District, and he has told me the same thing.
Amy Lewerson.
Hi, my question is a question about timing of the EA. I know you have it now, and at some point it'll go to OEQC, and then there'll be a 30-day trigger that the community has to respond. A concern I have is I heard earlier that the board's going to recess in December, so that means that it needs to be on the November agenda. Sorry.
Is it posted on OEQC website already?
Not that I know.
No, it's not. It's right now. It was, like I said, it was submitted October 4th. The staff is currently reviewing it for completeness to see if it even qualifies to go to the OEQC for publication. If it doesn't meet the minimum criteria in Chapter 343, we send it back with comments, and they could be things as little as format comments, but format is prescribed in 343, so if it's not within the prescribed format, that alone would make it incomplete.
Okay.
So I recognize that DPP's not finished yet with looking at it. My only concern was really a timing one for the board, because that 30-day, once it triggers, there's no opportunity to extend that, is my knowledge. Usually the city has to hold to that 30-day period. So it's something the board needs to be aware of, so that if it does, if it comes out the week after the board meeting,
That we would need to call a special
right,
meeting.
you need to have that on your radar, I think.
Got it. And we would have to have quorum in order to be able to do anything at the special meeting. But understand, everybody, if there's a 30-day comment period during December, I'm going to have to call a special meeting, and I hope you will all come. Okay? All right. Any other questions for Art Chelicombe? Charlie?
Art, in DPP's letter to Hawaii Planning LLC, you asked for cost data on the project.
Yes, sir.
If that cost data, when you've looked at it, clearly shows that this project is over $500,000, can you short-circuit the SMA minor process at that point and declare it a major?
Yes. Chapter 25, revised ordinances of Honolulu, is very clear, as well as Chapter 205A, Hawaii revised statutes, in terms of the cost. Regardless of the significance of the impact or no significance of the impact, if the project alone costs over $500,000 in valuation, then that's fair market valuation. That's not if you have, your Uncle Joe who can give you, free labor. It's the fair market value. If that fair market value exceeds $500,000, regardless of the impact, that would trigger a major special management area permit.
Yeah, but kind of the other part of my question was, if during your preliminary review over, say, the next couple of weeks, your office determines that it's clearly over $500,000, does it still go through the whole OEQC process and that extends out for months?
No, not necessarily. We can, if we find if we issue a FONSI or a finding of no significant impact, we can still do that from the EA procedure and still require a major SMA permit. The SMA permit process is 2 stages. One, before we accept the special management area permit application, before we even accept it, the environmental assessment process has to be completed. So we can complete the environmental assessment process, accept a permit application for an SMA, but it would be at a major if it exceeds the $500,000 threshold.